Everyone, I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and tonight is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. This is a Lyme Q&A webinar that you create each week with your questions. For those of you that are returning, good to see some familiar faces on my participant board here. And I see a number of new names here as well, too. I wish I could see your faces, actually, too. This format obviously doesn't allow for that. So for those of you that are new, the way that you participate is one way you can do that is write questions to me, okay? And so there's a chat box over here on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Write your question there. The only thing I ask is as you're writing your question, do not hit the enter key more than one time, all right? Each time that you hit the enter key, it actually sends the question to me, and that becomes very hard for me to follow the different parts of your question on my side. During the webinar tonight, I will post shorter questions. Some of the longer ones I cannot post, but the shorter ones I will post on the screen so that those of you that are participating in the live webinar can actually see them as I'm reading them. And I will read them. And the reason that I will read them is in the recorded version, unfortunately, the questions that I post on the screen in the live version do not show up in the recorded version. Okay, so I will be reading those to you, okay? I see that we have, there's some already, I can tell there's one really a longer question is one of the first questions here tonight. I think what I'll do is probably take a shorter one or two before that, and then we'll post, then I will go through the long question. I am creating a recording of the webinar tonight. And tomorrow morning, somewhere around 8 to 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time in Austin, where I am, I will get an email out to you that provides information about that recording. What are the major topics we talked about, as well as how do you see it? Right now, if for some reason you don't get that recording link, there's a few places you can, or a number of places you can find it. Number one, it'll be on my Facebook page, which is Facebook.com/treat Lyme. Okay. Number two, there's two places you can find it on my Lyme disease information site, which is called Treat Lyme. Many of you're all familiar with that. You can find it on the homepage, all the way at the bottom of the homepage, or you can find the recording on the webinars page too. Okay. And then finally, I also post the recording at my supplement store, which is Marty Ross MD Supplements, on the homepage as well. And that's at treatlyme.com. Okay, so the store is treatlyme.com. My Lyme disease information site is treatlyme.net. It creates a little bit of confusion, but that's where you can find both of those websites. Okay. During the webinar tonight, I will do some screen shares to show you information, so just be aware of that. And I think that the other thing is we're going to be off next week. And I thought I was going to be off the week after that, but as I've been thinking about how I'm going to construct my schedule, I think we will do a webinar, not next week, but the week after, okay? But I am changing the days of the week that I do those webinars. I'm changing it from Wednesday to Thursday, all right? So the new webinar day is going to be Thursday. It's still going to be at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I've got conflicts that are getting in the way of my ability to do it on Wednesdays, and I thought I was going to do those on Tuesdays, but there's a conflict there too. So anyhow, Thursdays are the days we're going to do it, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we will be off next week, but on the week after. And so in tomorrow's email, you'll be able to sign up for that next series of webinars as well too. Okay, all right. So enough of the business stuff. Let's go ahead and take a question here. All right, so this first question I'm going to take is from Nancy. Hi, Nancy. Let's see. How would you, I think there's an A that I'm seeing. I don't know if there was a B part, but let's see. How would you go about pulsing just for Lyme if using doxy and grapefruit seed extract? How many days on and off? Is it more potent to use tetracycline instead for pulsing? Oh, there is a B here, I see. Okay, part B. I was reading Richard Horowitz's book, and for some reason, tetracycline class antibiotics are not listed under treatment for cell wall forms. He lists them under treatment for intracellular forms. I was under the impression that tetracycline class antibiotics treated spirochetes too. Can you clarify? Yeah, okay. So let's talk about first part. We'll do A first, and then we'll do B, okay? All right, so there's many different ways to pulse antibiotics. So pulsing means you take them for a period of time and then you stop them, okay? One way that I have found that I've done it before, and so part of the problem is we don't really have research in humans that tell us what's the best way to pulse antibiotics. The other thing I would point out is pulsing does not work for everyone. Some people get benefit by it and some people don't, okay? So the idea behind pulsing for Lyme, not for Bartonella, not for Babesia, as many of you know from my previous webinars, I don't think you should pulse for Babesia. I don't think you should pulse for Bartonella. And the reason is that those germs replicate every 24 hours or so. In other words, on the days you're off antibiotics, they come back, okay? But Lyme replicates really slowly. And so there is some research from Petri dish that suggests that if we pulse, start and stop the antibiotics, we're able to treat a form of Lyme, which are known as persister cells. What a persister is Lyme, when it's been exposed to antibiotics for a while, about 20% of the spirochete form and 20% of the microscopic cyst form will turn into persister state or a persister cell. And persister cells are a form of the germ that basically goes into hibernation, just starts ignoring all the antibiotics, okay? And so what they showed on Petri dish experiments is that if you started and stopped the antibiotics 4 times on a Petri dish, okay, that you could wipe the germ out. Now, that just doesn't seem to happen clinically in people when we do that, but that's where we get the idea, okay? So regimens that I have found helpful, I sometimes will do, or when I was treating, I would do a regimen of 4 days on of antibiotics and then 3 days off, a 4-3 cycle, okay? And I would do that with both the tetracyclines and the grapefruit seed extract. I take them on the same days. Okay, that's how I would do that. Another way that I have found helpful, so that's called a short pulse. That's what I call it. Okay. Now some people will do 5 day on, 5 day off. All right. So those are other ways that people might do it. There's also what I call a long pulse regimen, which is to pulse where you use the antibiotics for continuously every day for about 2 months, and then you stop and you wait for symptoms to get worse. And that usually those symptoms are usually going to get worse at about 6 to 8 weeks. And what that does is that suggests that the germ has moved out of persister forms, starts growing more aggressively, and then therefore will respond to the antibiotics better, okay? So that usually winds up being about a 2 month on, 2 month off regimen, okay? Now I'm gonna show you a place you can read about both of these ideas. There's an article I have on just pulsing, and there's another article I have on treating persister cells, of which one of the ways to treat persister cells that I mentioned in my persister article is to do this, what I call the long pulsing, okay? All right, now to the other part of your question. And is tetracycline, let's see. So in terms of pulsing, the tetracyclines as a class, doxy, tetracycline, both of those would be okay to pulse with, okay? The antibiotic that I don't like pulsing is azithromycin, Zithromax, which is in a separate family. It's part of something called the macrolides, Biaxins in that family too. The Zithromax has a long half-life, meaning it has a long time to get out of you. And in fact, it takes about, I think it's got a half-life that would result in that drug being in you about 7 or 8 days after you take a pill, okay? So in other words, if you stop the antibiotic, even in the days that you're off of it, it's still in you, all right? So you don't get the benefit of pulsing, of being off an antibiotic that wakes the germ up so it responds better to the antibiotics, okay? That's why I don't use Zithromax. You can use Biaxin, which is also called clarithromycin, though, for pulsing. So just the macrolide Zithromax, azithromycin would be a problem, okay? All right, then. So Horowitz talks, so let me try to describe this a little bit. Okay, so there are certain families of antibiotics that work on the covering of the cell, of the spirochete, okay? Or they're known as cell wall antibiotics. They actually work on the outside of the cell, all right? And so those would be antibiotics that basically what they do is they interfere with the ability of the cell wall to repair itself. And effectively over time, the cell wall gets holes in it and as the germ grows, it bursts. Okay, so the antibiotic families that do that are the penicillins and another family called the cephalosporins, for instance. Those are the two main families that would be cell wall agents. Okay, now the main thing that they treat probably is the spirochete. There is some discussion always about whether a cyst has a cell wall or not. Okay, but for sure we know that the cell wall agents can treat spirochete. There is some petri dish experiments that suggest they might treat cyst as well too. All right, but traditionally we think of them more as just treating the covering of the spirochete. Okay, all right, then. So the spirochete, again, is the form of the germ. If you look at pictures, it looks like a corkscrew. Okay, the other form of the germ is something called a cyst form, but it goes by other names too. Some people call the cyst form a round body. Some people refer to it as the L form. Okay, so L form and round bodies and cyst probably are all the same thing, or are the same thing. All right, so essentially there's two forms of the germ. There's a spirochete, and then there's these little microscopic round forms called cyst. Okay, all right, now we think that when the spirochete gets under stress, it turns into a cyst form, basically. But also, just at any time, you might have some form of that germ that is in a cyst form. Cysts are harder to treat. Okay? All right. Now, in terms of antibiotics that work intracellular, they can treat the spirochete from the inside, okay, versus the penicillins, which are cell wall agents, and the cephalosporins like ceftin or cefuroxime, which is a cell wall agent, will treat the spirochete from the outside. The intracellular antibiotics get inside the spirochete and treat it from the inside, okay? They also, so not only does Lyme have these two forms of the spirochete and the round body cyst, L form, whatever you want to call it, Lyme also has the ability to live inside of cells and outside of cells, okay? Now, what's interesting is I looked at some research on this recently, is I didn't realize this, but the infectious disease doctor community generally doesn't believe that Lyme lives inside of cells. They think that's very controversial, all right? But there's some pretty compelling research that shows that it actually does live in cells, which means it can evade the immune system better by living inside of cells, all right? And so the antibiotics that get inside of cells are the tetracyclines, the macrolides, Zithromax, Biaxin, the azoles like metronidazole, tinidazole, which we also use to treat cyst. Rifampin is an antibiotic that can get inside of cells as well too. Okay, all right. So in terms of, yes, Horowitz is right. There's a cell wall class, a class that works on the cell wall, but cell wall antibiotics are going to work on spirochete from the outside. And then intracellular antibiotics are going to work on the spirochete from the inside. In addition, those intracellular antibiotics can get at Lyme that has moved inside of cells too. Okay? All right. Whew. That's a lot. No, it's complicated. I try to explain that in my article about Lyme disease antibiotics as well too. So let me just go ahead. I'm going to do a screen share here and show you all a few things here. Okay, so this is Treat Lyme. This is my Lyme disease information site. I know many of you are aware of this. Here, for instance, is the tab that you would click to sign up for the webinars. Okay, this is the tab that you can find my book about Lyme disease. What do you use to kill the various germs of Lyme? Okay, but on the online guide, I'm just going to show you some things here. So first of all, in terms of pulsing, where would I put that? Well, I can't remember where I put it. Let me just look here. So I have an article on pulsing, and it's called how to pulse antibiotics for Lyme. Okay, so you may have to find it by clicking on the search box. And in here, I talk about why you might want to do it, okay? And I talk about the various ways that you can do it in this article too, okay? Now, the other thing that I had mentioned was the reason to pulse is to treat persister cells, okay? And if you're looking for an article about what are persisters and what are other ideas to treat persisters, take a look at this article called How to Treat Persister Lyme, What Works, okay? And in here I talk about the long pulsing idea as well too. I talk about dapsone, for instance, is in this one as well too, okay? All right. I think there was one other thing I wanted to show you. I'm blanking on it now. Anyhow, those are the two places that I would look to get some more information to. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. All right. Nancy, I hope that gives you some useful information. Oh, I know what I want to show you. So look, I'm not going to go back there now, but look on the online guide under the infection treatments plan section. And what you'll find is my article, my Lyme disease antibiotic guide. And in that guide, I describe the various forms of Lyme, what works inside, what works outside. Okay? All right. All right. Very good, Nancy. Good luck to you. Thanks for that question. All right. This is a question from Justin that is, I'm not going to post because it is very long. And what I have found, when I post the long ones, it literally blocks my screen, so I can't get rid of it. I can't cancel it out. And I had to end the webinar one time because of that. So I'm going to read this one. Okay. And I apologize. It's probably going to be a little bit lengthy, and I might have to read it twice just so I understand what the question is. But here we go. Hello, Justin. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. I have mold illness and Lyme. I tested positive fish test for Bartonella, negative for Babesia. Very fatigued, heart palpitations have subsided, deja vu, anxiety, dizziness. Those are your symptoms. So fatigue, heart palpitations, and they have subsided, deja vu, anxiety, and dizziness. Okay. Tried Tinidazole for 2 months, Ceftin 3 months, then azithromycin 2 months, rifampin for 3 months. Slight improvement, currently medicated by cholestyramine charcoal pills, well over a year, still on Biocidin 12 months, liposomal glutathione 8 months, low-dose naltrexone 2 milligrams for 9 months, still on all these plus vitamins, probiotics, Meriva. Stopped all antibiotics for 7 months, began your Babesia treatment of a TovaCombi and a ProQuenelle, which is also known as Malarone, everyone. With Zithromax 2 months ago, no real improvement. Added Cryptolepis 2 weeks ago, 1 tablespoon, 2 times a day. Too many binders to go 5 milliliters 3 times a day, and have another slight improvement. Thank you. Okay. So Cryptolepis, everyone, is an herb that kills Babesia, and the Malarone that Justin is on also treats Babesia. Azithromycin can help with Babesia as well too. My Lyme litter doctor recommends I add rifampin again. What do you think? I'm obviously treating for Babesia now. I experienced forehead headaches on my first go around with rifampin, but it did help. Should have pulsed it and gone longer. Experienced forehead headaches when I meditate now with the air hunger, which is why I'm treating for Babesia. Would adding rifampin to this regimen or pulsing between the Malarone and rifampin be wise? Let's see here. Also, thyroid levels are, I'm just going to look this over. All right, so I'm gonna confine my response to the antibiotics. I'm not going to talk about the thyroid for right now. Okay, there's just too many things to cover here. All right, so in terms of your current diagnoses, okay, so the diagnoses that you showed me is that you've got a Bartonella fish test. I believe it was your Bartonella fish test was positive. Okay, so we've got laboratory evidence of Bartonella. Okay, all right. You've got Lyme. I don't know how you've come up with that diagnosis, but you've got Lyme. And again, you don't have to have a laboratory test necessarily to prove that you have Lyme. And then your Babesia testing was negative. Your symptoms, though, of air hunger, palpitations, deja vu, anxiety, and even the dizziness suggest Babesia. All right. So clinically, I think that you have Babesia. I would agree that you all have decided to treat Babesia. If you're in my practice, I probably would be treating for Babesia too. Okay. Now, when you treat for Babesia, I recommend usually a continuous treatment of 4 to 5 months on a regimen that's working. On a regimen that's working, it will often take 1 to 2 months before you start to see some improvement. And if you don't get improvement, then I would suggest adding another agent or changing that treatment. And that's what you did. You added the Cryptolepis, and now you're starting to see some improvements, okay? So number one, I would definitely keep, based on your symptoms, from what you have just told me here, if you were my patient, I would suggest that probably you keep taking that the treatment for Babesia, including the cryptolepis. All right. Now, in terms of covering for the Lyme germ, so right now the azithromycin that you're on would treat intracellular Lyme, would also treat the spirochete. Okay, but this regimen that you're on is not doing anything for the cyst form of Lyme, and I would suspect that you haven't treated long enough for Lyme. Lyme on average takes about 2 years to get over, okay? So, and again, I don't have the benefit of asking you a lot of questions more about all your symptoms to help be sure Lyme is still there or not. But just on the length of time and for what you briefly have written here, I suspect Lyme might still be there. And adding in rifampin would turn this into a full Lyme treatment as well too. And that is because azithromycin treats intracellular Lyme, also treats spirochete Lyme. And then in terms of the cyst form of Lyme, rifampin can be beneficial for that too. In addition, if you happen to have some Bartonella still, and I suspect you could, it picks that up as well too. All right, can you mix these all together? Yeah, I did often in my practice when I was treating clinically. I've never found a problem with doing this kind of a mix with people, okay? So I hope that gives you some insight. I'm not going to take the thyroid question just because there's enough other things to look at here, and I want to get to some of the other questions as well too. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Justin. If anyone's wanting to know how I just came up with those ideas, like what treats what, I'm going to just do a quick screen share here. All right, so this is, again, my Lyme disease information site called Treat Lyme. All right, 2 places you can look. Number 1, if you want to have a full resource that looks at which herb or prescription antibiotics, antimicrobials, antivirals, antiparasitics, etc., would you use for which germ, take a look at my book called Anti-Germ Action Plans for Lyme Disease. And then the subtitle is How to Use Herbal and Prescription Germ Killers for Bacteria, Parasites, Virus, and Yeast. Okay, all right. That's one place you can find out. And you can either do this as a downloadable PDF, you can buy it on Amazon as a Kindle version, or you can get a paperback version through Amazon too. Okay, that's one place. All right. Some people like to have hard paper that they can feel. All right. All right. The other place you can get pretty much the same information, it's not edited and cleaned up as nicely as the book, would be to look in my online guide here and take a look at the infection treatment plans section. Okay. And in here, there's information on how do you treat basically all the infections that you have in Lyme disease. All right. So there's my Lyme disease antibiotic guide. There's information about how do you treat Babesia. There's information about how do you treat Bartonella. Okay. All right. Yeast, Anaplasma ehrlichia, etc. Okay. They're all here. Parasites, viruses. So you can find that information here as well too. All right. The difference between what is here and my book is the book is a more cleaned up version. It's been edited. I had some help with an editor that helped me work on it. I think it may be just a little bit easier to read, but also sometimes it's just easier to read things when you can see it in front of you too. Okay. All right. All right. Let me go back here. All right. Good luck to you, Justin. Thank you for that question. Hello, Craig. Let's see. 70-year-old male, Lyme, mole, 2 years. I think you may mean mold. 2 years. Splotchy red pattern under skin on legs, which only appears when I stand up, disappears when laying down. Blood flow dependent. Doctor thinks Bartonella or viruses in blood. Any ideas or treatments? Also having hot flashes, cause and treatment suggestions. Craig, I'm sorry about the scale. I'm not going to be able to help you with that because that would be something I would need to actually look at, physically examine to get a better idea. I'm not sure what the meaning is of that. Okay, I would need to give me a better idea to actually physically look at it. All right. In terms of hot flashes, it could be a side effect of medications. I would want to know what herbs and prescriptions you're taking. Okay, that would be one place to start. Your physician should be able to help you take a look at that. It could also, hot flashes sometimes can be part of Babesia. So I would want to ask you a lot of questions to figure out from a symptom standpoint, is Babesia present, okay? So if you want to know what those are, and I have an article about how do you diagnose Babesia on my website. When it comes to diagnosing Babesia, I'm not a big believer in using testing because testing will miss it a lot. The reason testing will miss it a lot is we estimate 15 to 20 strains. So therefore, and we only have the means to test for about 2 or 3 strains. So it's possible to have Babesia and have negative testing. Okay, so generally my preference is to build a Babesia treatment or to consider treating Babesia based on symptoms. All right, so major symptoms of Babesia can be severe fatigue. Okay, that's one, but Lyme and other things can do that, but especially Babesia. Okay, temperature fluctuations, hot 1 minute, cold the next, can do it. Okay, it can be a symptom of that. Drenching night sweats can be a symptom of it. Air hunger can be a symptom of it. Anxiety, panic attacks. So not ongoing anxiety, but more panic attack anxiety can be part of it. Headaches in the front of the head often can be part of Babesia. Having a lot of deja vu experiences, more than say 1 a week. Sometimes people with Babesia have it like twice a day or even more than that. Okay, so having quite a bit of that. And then another symptom people with Babesia have is they'll have a lot of little red spots on their skin that look like blood vessels ruptured. Now at 70, we also get spots that can look like that too, but this would be a lot of them, an excessive amount of them, okay? So those are some things to look at. So in terms of those symptoms, if you want to take a look at it just to see symptom-wise, do you think Babesia is there? And so you can bring it up to the attention of your doctor. What I would do is take a look at my TreatLine website. Go to the page called How to Diagnose, okay? And you could either look at this one called, it could be Bartonella Babesia, or you could take a look at my article called How to Diagnose Babesia. Either one of these walks through the symptoms, okay? All right, go back here. All right, good luck to you, Craig. Sorry, I just can't help with that rash because I just can't look at it. Okay. Hello, Kit. Hi, Dr. Ross. I thought I was done treating Lyme, Babesia, and Bartonella, but I'm left with horrible fatigue that seems to coincide with my cycle during my period and ovulation that I didn't have before all this. Is there a hormonal axis that could be messed up or any hormone problems I can have my provider test for? Thank you. All right. So, Kit, a couple of things to think about. One is, yes, take a look and make sure that your hormones are okay. And I'll say more about that here in a second. But the second thing that you could be left with is injury to your energy factories in your cells, which are called mitochondria. All right, so every one of our cells has an energy system, and they're made up of mitochondria. All right, and probably there's some estimates say there's about 300 to 400 mitochondria on average per cell. Inside mitochondria, sugar and fat are burned through a bunch of chemical reactions to create cell fuel. Cell fuel is something called is called ATP, okay? All right. Now, one of the things that can happen when you have chronic infection is the immune system, in trying to get rid of that infection, can sometimes overproduce or will make a bunch of oxidizing agents to kill the germs, all right? And in close proximity, white blood cells will just spit out their oxidizing agents on germs and kill them, basically, okay? But that only works when white blood cells are on top of the germ, all right? Now, the problem is these oxidizing agents actually can injure fat membranes found in our body. That means they can injure the cell membrane, because our cell membranes, every one of our cells is made up of a double layer of fat, okay, or double layer fatty acids, or the membrane that makes up the covering of our mitochondria is a double layer of fatty acids as well too. All right, so oxidizing agents can damage those fat membranes. Now, where that becomes a problem with the mitochondria is mitochondria need a healthy membrane to function correctly, and they need it primarily for a couple of reasons. Number one, that healthy membrane is responsible for carrying fat and sugar, the fuel supply, if you will, for mitochondria to the inside of mitochondria, all right? And if that fatty membrane is damaged from oxidizing damage, okay, it may impair or the ability for it to carry fat and sugar to the inside, all right? Second thing is there's a number of the chemical reactions that generate cell fuel require electrons to be donated to them. And what donates the electrons is the healthy covering as well too. All right. So if that healthy covering is damaged, you don't get adequate electron donation to the chemical reactions. Chemical reactions don't take place well. You have sluggish energy as well too. All right. So if your Lyme and your germs are under control and out, and I say if, and you're still having a lot of fatigue, one of the things that I would always want to do with my patients was to do a trial of mitochondria repair. All right. And so what I would use is a product called NT Factor. It's made up of the fats that make up the covering of the mitochondria. There's a research that shows that one of the components of NT Factor Energy, the product is made by Research Nutritionals, it's called NT Factor Energy. There's research showing that one of the components, which is NT Factor in the NT Factor Energy, that NT Factor and people that took it for low energy found that on average by 2 months there was energy improvements of 40%. All right. Now the people in these two studies that were done, were not people with Lyme necessarily. They had possibly other causes of their fatigue. But what I found when I was treating Lyme is that I would find average energy improvements of about 40% by 2 months. Okay. And the way that you use it is NT Factor. You take a couple pills 3 times a day for 2 months. And then after 2 months, then you want to decrease it down to 1 pill 3 times a day for another 4 months. All right. If it's not working by 2 months, stop it. It's not going to be your problem. All right. Second thing that I would add with that is I would be on a good antioxidant that helps repair the injury from the outside of the mitochondria, and that's glutathione. I like working with liposomal glutathione, the product I like using for that because it actually has research showing that it does elevate glutathione inside red blood cells, and therefore we think it would in other kinds of cells too, is the product by Research Nutritionals called Trifortify. And you would want to do 5 milliliters 1 time a day of that. Okay. That's the minimal package. All right. If you want to throw everything at it, I would also add coenzyme Q10 to that. I would do that as 400 milligrams twice a day. CoQ10 helps carry electrons around your mitochondria. You do not want to use coenzyme Q10 though if you are on Malarone, okay, or Mepron. Both of those have an active ingredient called atovaquone. Atovaquone is interfered with how it functions if you happen to be on coenzyme Q10. Okay, and the other thing you need to do to repair your mitochondria is if you are not a red meat eater, you should be on something called acetyl L-carnitine. Carnitine is a protein that you can get from a red meat, and it is the vehicle that carries fat across the membrane of the mitochondria. So if you're not having red meat on a regular basis, you could be deficient in it. Especially vegetarians should be on acetyl L-carnitine. That's 500 milligrams twice a day for a month. Then decrease it down to 500 milligrams 1 time a day. Okay. I'll show you an article that you can go to read about mitochondria repair. Okay. All right. So that could be one of the things. All right. Another thing that I would look at with my patients that just had ongoing fatigue and nothing was budging, and I thought that the germs were under control, is I might look to see, do they have mold toxins built up in them? It can be one of those illnesses. Mold toxin illness can look a lot like Lyme disease does. Okay. And it's something that you could, so according to the work of Richie Shoemaker, there are 25% of all people that when we breathe in mold toxins, they get trapped inside of us. We cannot clean them out. 75% of people, we could walk into a building full of mold and never have a problem at all, right? But 25% of people have this problem. It's a genetic abnormality that makes it so that you cannot clean mold toxins out once they get in you, okay? And if they get trapped in you, they become an ongoing source of injury to the mitochondria. And they also lead to increased production of cytokines, those inflammatory chemicals that many of you heard me talk about in the past. Basically, cytokines are what give you all of your Lyme symptoms, okay? Immune system makes a lot of cytokines when it sees Lyme. Immune system makes a lot of cytokines when it sees mold toxins too, okay? So 2 things I would look at in addition to the hormone idea. One is fix mitochondria. Secondly, see if you might have mold toxin illness, even if you don't remember ever being in a moldy building. Stuff can be hidden behind walls, okay? So, and the testing I like to do for that is I like doing a test through a company called Real Time Labs. They have a urine test you can do to see if you are peeing out excessive amounts of mold toxins, okay? real-time labs, okay? You can find that information in my article on multoxicity illness as well too. All right, then back to your question. Could it be hormones? Yeah, most likely though, not estrogen and progesterone like you're thinking about, the female hormones, okay? The hormones that I would see most related to this could be thyroid. And so, but you need to work with a physician that's willing to interpret the labs liberally. And if you're looking for what I mean by that liberal interpretation, I would read the article that I have on thyroid, okay? But low thyroid, ongoing low thyroid, clinically low thyroid, where some of the labs may be in normal range, you may still have low thyroid, and I explain that in my thyroid article. So let me just show you a few resources here for you to take a look at. Okay, so typically, I'm not going to, when I was treating, I would not get aggressive about treating for mitochondria injury unless we're about 6 months or so into treatment and nothing seems to be working, okay? But the other time I'd look at it is if somebody's gotten better, but we just can't get them all the way there, and fatigue is their big part of their picture, all right? So in terms of that, take a look at my section called Energy and Fatigue here, okay? And then scroll down and look at this article called Power Up Energy and Mitochondria. All right. This is where I talk about mitochondria repair, how they get injured, what you would want to take for it. Okay. All right. All right. In terms of this idea about mold toxin illness, take a look at my section here on detoxification. And I would take a look at this one called mold toxin illness in Lyme disease. Okay, all right. This can become kind of the hidden factor, that reason that many people just don't get well. All right. I think those are the big two things I mentioned. Oh, the thyroid article. In terms of the thyroid article, take a look at my section on hormones. And I would take a look at this. It's a rather long article, but it's got a lot of detail in it. You might even want to just bring it to your physician so they can look at it too, okay? It's kind of an alternative way of looking at thyroid that looks beyond the standard labs in terms of how to diagnose thyroid, okay? All right, so let me go back here. All right, Kit, good luck to you. And thank you for the question too. Hello, Susan C. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for your ongoing support and advice. What is your experience with stem cell therapy for Lyme? It's a good question. You know, it's mixed from what I was seeing, and I think it's still too early to tell whether this is going to be a beneficial treatment for many people or not. First of all, we don't have any research on it yet, okay? So the idea with stem cells are like the most rudimentary cell. And stem cells can repair injury, all right? So they can repair injured nerves, they can repair injured joints, all right? So you know of people, for instance, getting stem cells injected into their knees, all right? So we have some science that says that when it comes to injury of joints, that it can be helpful. There is some science that shows when we have injury of the nervous system, like in multiple sclerosis, that it can be helpful, okay? The other thing that might be helpful in is helping the immune system to work better. So if the immune system is injured, repairing it with stem cells may help too, all right? So the idea with some people with Lyme, the reason they may not get better ultimately is that they just got too much tissue injury, in which case, in theory, stem cells should help. The other reason sometimes people may not get better from Lyme is their immune systems are too injured from the germ too, okay? You got too much immune suppression. And in theory, stem cells should help with that too. But I will tell you, from the people that I have seen that have gotten it, it's a mixed bag. There are some people that have benefit, but I think on the whole, I don't see much benefit overall. It's a lot of money that people spend, and I just have not been overall impressed. Okay, that's not to say some people don't get benefit. And perhaps people that are pursuing it are already ones that are probably the sickest of the sick, and therefore it's harder to see benefit, okay? But I'm not, I guess what I would still say about stem cells, I think the jury's still out as to whether it's beneficial. And I think anyone that does it at this point, I think it's still I would call it a very experimental type of treatment. Okay? All right. Thanks for the question, Susan. Hello, Oscar. Dr. Ross. Been on Mepron for 3 months. Is it okay to switch it out with the TovaCombi ProQuenelle pills for 3 weeks before switching back to Mepron? I'll be traveling. Yeah, I see no problem doing that. Now, just keep in mind that one thing you can find, though, just beware, all right? So the fact that Mepron, which has a TovaCombi in it, and that typical dose on Mepron that many doctors will use, and it may be what you're doing too, is to take 5 milliliters of Mepron, which is a TovaCombi, twice a day. Okay, so that's 750 milligrams of a TovaCombi that you take each time you take it twice a day, or you're getting 1,500 milligrams a day. Okay? All right, that's the standard dose. Some doctors will actually dose it so that you take 2 teaspoons, which is 1,500 milligrams one time, and then 100 milligrams later in the day too. All right? All right, so that's a lot of TovaCombi. All right. Malarone is a TovaCombi with ProQuenelle. ProQuenelle is a quinine-like medicine. All right? Quinine is what we used to use to treat malaria, for instance. Okay? All right. Now, in Malarone, the TovaCombi is 250 milligrams per pill. The ProQuenelle is 100 milligrams. All right. Now, in general, I found that pill, 250 milligrams of a TovaCombi with 100 milligrams of ProQuenelle, twice a day, one pill twice a day, to work as well as 5 milliliters, which is 750 milligrams of a TovaCombi twice a day. Okay. And the reason is that ProQuenelle being in there means you probably just don't need as much of the TovaCombi. All right. So I think they're probably equivalent as long as you're taking at least one pill twice a day. All right. But keep in mind that what works, just because the TovaCombi is working at high dose for you, when you drop it down in terms of the strength that you're taking in the pill, it may not work as well. And maybe Malarone may not work as well in you as what Mepron does. All right. Just be aware. You may, it is possible it may not work as well because the fact that one drug works doesn't mean another one will. Okay. But in terms of this being a reasonable thing to look at doing, yeah, it's reasonable. It would be something I would have tried with my patients when I was practicing. Okay. All right. But make sure you're taking at least one pill twice a day on it. Okay. Good luck to you, Oscar. Enjoy your trip, wherever you're going. All right. Hello, Pontus. Let's see. Big mess in Sweden. Hi from Sweden. Sorry for my English change the plan during treatment. I did start your tier 2 on Bartonella in Lyme. Diagnosed with Bartonella based on symptoms. Lyme conferred on test. I was 3 weeks on only clarithromycin, and since 3 weeks on clarithromycin doxy following your action plan with food, sleep, etc., we did find mold in my apartment last week, and I moved out, and the majority of symptoms did solve in 2 days. Mold is bad. I have antibiotics for Aspergillus. Today I did see my new doctor, and he thinks I most likely have Babesia and maybe second Bartonella. I don't know what to do, and he says I must treat Babesia first with Lyme. You said in an earlier QA that Bartonella must go first. Why and what the difference except for Malarone? What do you think? I have all the meds to do it, but I don't know where to start. Last thing, can I detox from mold at the same time? I get huge red rashes, and sometimes also the eyes get red. Do I need to be worried about resistance from Bartonella when I was only on clarithromycin for 3 weeks? The strange thing is that I feel most okay at the moment. Best from Pontus. P.S. I can't find you talk about tinnitus anywhere. All right, so tinnitus, just briefly, tinnitus is ringing in the ears. It can be a side effect of medicines. Sometimes the antibiotics we use. It can also just be injury from Lyme affecting the nerve in the ear, and also Bartonella. Okay, the treatment is deal with the germs, basically. In terms of things you can do to help with tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, acupuncture sometimes can help. Something called craniosacral therapy, which is very light manipulation of the bones of the head. It's a type of therapy called craniosacral therapy. Massage therapist sometimes will do that. Okay, so acupuncture that. The other thing that can sometimes help ringing in the ears is the herb ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo makes it so that your red blood cells are more flexible, and therefore they can flow more deeply and easily into narrow blood vessels, which improves blood flow to the nerve that's injured, and that can sometimes help with the ringing. If you're going to do ginkgo biloba, it's about 80 milligrams twice a day. Sometimes can be helpful for tinnitus. Okay, so those would be some things to think about for tinnitus: acupuncture, craniosacral therapy, possibly ginkgo biloba, and treat your Lyme and your Bartonella. Okay, all right. Second part of your question, or the other part of your question was, which order do you treat Babesia and Bartonella? All right, so my observation has been based on the experience of Burrascano. Burrascano, as many of you know, is the Lyme pioneer here in this country. He's no longer treating, but he was until about 5 or 6 years ago. And his observation was that in his practice is that in people that had Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, that if he wound up treating for Babesia before Bartonella, it made it more difficult to get over the Bartonella. Okay, that was his observation. I followed that guideline. There are times, though, that I would treat Babesia first. And the times that I would treat Babesia first is if the symptoms of Babesia were so debilitating that I thought it was the biggest barrier to that person getting well, in which case I might treat Babesia before I went for Bartonella. Okay, all right. So a general rule is go for your Bartonella first, because otherwise it may be harder to get over if you do Babesia first. On the other hand, clinically, sometimes you have to just make a decision based on what's worse for the person, in which case sometimes I would treat for Babesia. Okay, let's see. So in terms of your Bartonella getting resistant from only being on 3 weeks of clarithromycin, that's not my experience. I don't think you'd have that to be concerned about. Okay, all right. I think I answered most of your questions there. Good luck to you, Pontus. Hello, Colleen. Let's see. Why do Lyme symptoms fluctuate, move, and change? Do you have a theory about this? Thank you for all you do, Dr. Ross. It's a question. I don't know why. And I don't have a decent theory about it, other than that is one of the really hallmarks of Lyme. In fact, I know you're all familiar with Dr. Horowitz. Dr. Horowitz, one of the things that he's developed is this his Lyme questionnaire. His MSIDS questionnaire is what he calls it. And he's been doing some research trying to figure out, of all the questions he asks, which are the ones that are probably are best indicators that you might have Lyme. All right. And the one that is proving to be, I think what his research says may be just about as good as lab testing, is the wandering nature of joint pain or the wandering nature of nerve pain. So if you have wandering joint pain or wandering nerve pain, that some of his original studies about his questionnaire that is suggesting those could be diagnostic for Lyme. Okay, so it's pretty interesting. But why that happens that way, I don't know. I don't have a good theory for that, other than it is something very peculiar to Lyme. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Colleen. Frank says hi. Hi, Frank. I don't think I'm going to post that one. All right, hold on here just a minute, everyone. Hello, Luke. Let's see. I have Lyme since 2008. Have done most of the existing protocols. Since 1 year, I have severe ear nerve pain. I started now on your combination of doxy, rifampin, Bactrim. What do you think? I don't know. I don't have enough symptoms or history about what's gone on, of what you've done before this, or about what's going on right now to know if this is a good idea for you or not. What I would say is that combination of doxy, rifampin, and Bactrim is a triple drug regimen for Bartonella. which nerve injury, nerve pain can be due to Bartonella sometimes. That regimen is also a good Lyme regimen. The doxine would treat intracellular and spirochete Lyme. Rifampin would pick up cyst and intracellular Lyme. Bactrim, there's some petri dish evidence by Dr. Ying Zhang out of Hopkins that shows that it might be useful against persister Lyme. And so therefore that seems like a reasonable way. So if your nerve injury is from Lyme, that has you covered there too. All right. So in terms of the regimen, it makes sense because both BART and Lyme could give you nerve injury. However, I don't know whether this is BART or Lyme in you because I don't get to ask you a bunch of clinical questions to help figure that out. Okay? All right. The other thing I would do because of the ear nerve pain is do things to repair your mitochondria. The things you do to repair mitochondria also repair the nerves and the nerve coverings, okay? So I talked earlier tonight about mitochondria repair. I have a similar article that I've written about nerve repair, which essentially is fix your mitochondria, that helps fix the nerves. If you fix your mitochondria, that helps the nerves to heal and start working better too. Also, the NT factor that I talked about earlier about as a means of helping to fix your mitochondria, the covering of the mitochondria, NT factor also repairs the double layer of fat membrane that makes up your nerve coverings as well too, okay? All right, so I'm going to show you that article again. Hold on here just a minute. Had to scoot around there. Let's see here. Let's just turn on my screen share here. Okay, so take a look in the my brain and nerves chapter in my online treatment guide, okay? And I would take a look at, bear with me, I'm trying to see which article I would steer you towards. Take a look at this article called Neuropathy Repair, Heal That Tingling, Numbness, and Pain. Okay, that's one place to look. The other one you might want to look at is this, my brain isn't working, I think, what can I do? Okay, similar information is in both of those in terms of how do you repair nerve and nerve injury. All right? Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Luke. Hello, Tom. Happy holidays, Dr. Ross. Thank you very much. Same to you. What steps would you take for someone who is Lyme positive and has many gut issues? Specifically, lower intestinal issues such as abdominal cramping, burning pains, slight blood pressure, pain around the navel and waistline, weight loss, and unformed stools. It occurs all the time, every day, but can get worse after eating certain foods. I have some elevated IgG for foods, and I stay away from them. CDSA testing, which is CDSA, everyone stands for Comprehensive Digestive Stool Analysis, revealed moderate dysbiosis and lack of diversity of beneficial bacteria. I've been on Biocidin and Cemento for 4 months and have alternated between the LSF and regular formula without much improvement. When I take a high-dose probiotic, I often feel worse. I had taken Alinea for 7 days, but did not see improvement and pain was worse while on it. Could this be Lyme-related co-infections or from dysbiosis issues itself or other pathogens? A biopsy for inflammatory bowel disease has ruled that out for now. What would your next steps be? Okay, so Tom, one of the things, okay, so in terms of what Tom has just mentioned here, so he's got, again, a lot of gassy, crampy, poor digestion, okay? And then he's got some laboratory evidence that's showing that the bacteria that make up the intestines don't look good, all right? Now, in that comprehensive digestive stool analysis, they probably looked to see if he has too many yeast in his intestines as well, too. But what I will tell you is CDSA testing or any testing to see if you grow yeast is not always accurate. In other words, even though your CDSA test did not pick up too many yeast in your intestines, in a situation like this, often there is yeast overgrowth that is going on. And based on clinical symptoms, I sometimes would treat for yeast as well too. Okay, so one of the things I would suggest if you haven't done it yet would be to so what is what? All right, so your intestines are made up of both good bacteria and yeast. Okay, and they live together, they cohabitate together, and they keep each other in balance. Now, if you get an imbalance of good bacteria, and you do have an imbalance of good bacteria, they're already telling you that creates space that yeast can move in and take over your intestines, okay? And what happens is that then it makes it harder to have enough bacteria, healthy bacteria, to aid in good digestion. And so you get a lot of gassiness and bloating, all right? If you have too many yeast in your intestines, that results in allergies within the intestinal lining as well, too. That also can lead to leaky gut syndrome, a whole host of things giving you these GI symptoms, okay? So when I see somebody with a situation like this, even if the CDSA is negative, what I often would do is treat for the possibility of yeast overgrowth anyhow, okay? And the way that I would do that is to work with nystatin as a pill, 500,000 international units, 2 pills twice a day. And the other thing I would do is I'd combine it with an antifungal prescription called diflucan. Diflucan is pretty strong. Most of the time it will work. And that combination, if yeast is a problem, should have you feeling better with your GI symptoms by about 3 to 4 weeks. Okay? All right. All right. Now, the diflucan is 200 milligrams one time a day. In terms of your gut and not being able to tolerate probiotics, it may be an issue of the prebiotics that are in the probiotics, all right? So prebiotics are things that help the bacteria in your probiotics work better and live better, okay? Often they have some component of fiber in them too. You may want to take a look at something called Corebiotic Sensitive by Research Nutritionals, all right? So they have 2 forms of Corebiotic. There's Corebiotic and there's Corebiotic Sensitive. Corebiotic Sensitive does not have fiber in it and therefore tends to be better tolerated in people that have a lot of gassy, bloated kind of issues like you're having. Okay, and that usually I would recommend that as 2 pills one time a day when I was treating patients in my practice, okay? Now what Corebiotic is, it's a spore-forming soil-based probiotic. And what that means, these are germs that came from the ground, okay? Spore-forming probiotics assist the normal bacteria that live in your intestines to work better and to gain a better foothold. All right, so they're going to help with a better repopulation, a support of the existing good bacteria that still remain in your intestines. All right. Okay, now I would do that for about a month. If things don't get better, the next step that I often would do with a patient of mine, especially if there are a lot of gassiness and bloating, and even if they had negative biopsies, then I might go ahead and do a 3-week empirical trial to see if there's a parasite in there by treating for the parasite by using Alinea. Now, you already did that, it looks like. I think you did that. Oh, you did it for 7 days. I usually would use Alinea for about 21 days, actually, in my practice, 500 milligrams twice a day. Now, Alinea is the universal anti-parasite medicine. It is designed to treat just about any kind of parasite that might live in the intestines. Now, the reason I'm saying to treat, even though the CDSA test came back negative, is parasites are also hard to see, all right? And in fact, there's good studies that show that if you hand a stool sample off to somebody in the lab and they're supposed to find parasites, the studies tell us that the success rate in finding parasites in the stool sample, depending on the studies, range from 20% to, I think, 90%. So some of the studies say you can only find them 20% of the time. Some of the studies say you can find them 90% of the time. In other words, it's, for lack of a better term, it's a crapshoot. Sorry about that. But it's hard to rely on your testing for parasites, okay? So what I would probably do in this situation, if you were my patient, and I was still practicing clinical medicine, what I probably would do is treat yeast for a month with the nystatin diflucan combination. Use Corebiotic as your probiotic, okay? If that didn't work, then I would try a 3-week trial of Alinea, 500 milligrams twice a day on that, okay? Now, given the level of gut dysfunction that you're having here too, I would consider getting on something called L-glutamine powder. L-glutamine is an amino acid that is the fuel source for the large intestine cells. It helps them work better and heal better, okay? And typically you want to take somewhere around 12 grams a day. Depends on the product you get, but usually this is going to come as a scoop. And you're going to take one scoop is going to be anywhere from like 3 to 4 grams. And you want to take one scoop at least 3 times a day, basically. Okay. And that's going to help your cells that line the intestines heal. All right. So that would be some things to consider for you. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Tom. It's a messy situation you have there, but I think you can. And if they haven't gone for yeast for a decent period of time, I would really start with that. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. See, Kelly says, I can't get a connection. Anyone else having a problem? Um, I'm not hearing of a problem here. I'm not seeing other people writing that, Kelly, so I hope you were able to figure that out. All right. Hello, Mark. Finding a doctor willing to treat chronic Lyme is very difficult. The system eliminates and punishes doctors that do that. I was saddened when I found out I would not be able to see you. Just curious if you have advice, opinions. So yeah, I mean, believe me, I've lived through the complications of this. In terms of, Mark, I can't remember where you live. I know that you, anyhow, I'm not sure where you are. Okay. What I can tell you is there are a couple physicians across the country that still will treat by telephone. They may still require that you see them at least one time to prescribe. One of those is a colleague of mine, a naturopathic doctor down in California. Her name is Nicola McFadzean, and she's written a lot of things about Lyme disease. You may want to look her up. Another one is a colleague of mine in Seattle, Washington, named Kim Iller. That's Iller. All right, those are a couple people to think about. Those are people that. Anyhow, that's who I would take a look at. Okay, I don't have any other opinion for you on that, unfortunately. All right, good luck to you, Mark. Hello, Craig. Let's see. Do you know of any contraindications of taking itraconazole and rifampin together? Yeah, the big one is both can inflame your liver. And I would want to see if one interferes with the metabolism of the other one. I'd have to look it up directly. But generally, mixing an azole, which is itraconazole, other azoles would be difluconazole, ketoconazole. The azoles can inflame the liver. Rifampin can inflame the liver. And so that would be the contraindication. I usually would try not to do both at the same time. Usually. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Craig. Hello, Heather. Hi, Dr. Ross. Bartonella questions. My LMD had me on 300 milligrams of doxy per day and 250 milligrams Zithromax per day for Lyme and Bartonella. Hold on here just a minute. 300 milligrams of doxy per day and 250. Okay. I took this combo for a few months, didn't get much better, but saw some improvements. I noticed on your website you recommend 500 milligrams Zithromax with doxy for Bartonella. Do you think my treatment was adequate? I then transitioned to Buhner herbs, but feel awful on Houttenia, and it has taken me 4 months to get up to 4 drops of it per day. Is there an alternative way to kill Bart without using Houttenia? I'm using Acida acuta, cat's claw, Stephania, and Cryptolepis. Thank you. So all I can say is based on my experience, and that is I found Zithromax 500 milligrams to be more effective than to do the 250. Okay, now that's not to say your doctor was wrong. I'm just saying in my experience and my practice in Seattle, Washington, I found that to be better. If you're having difficulty with the Hutania, the best herbal combination I have found is the Hutania Sitta. I find that it works about 70-75% of the time. I know that some of my other colleagues discuss getting benefit using oregano oil. I don't have enough experience with it knowing for sure if it's going to be an adequate treatment for Bartonella. But if you can't get your doctor to prescribe other combinations of antibiotics, and there's a number of things you could use, and I've written about those in my Lyme guide. Okay, I treat Lyme, my online Lyme guide. But if you're having a lot of symptoms of Bartonella still, you either want to look back at retreating again, possibly with a different combination, or I would try to do something a little bit stronger. If you can't do the Hutania, you might want to look at using adding some oregano into this. Okay, I just can't guarantee it's going to work. I don't have enough practical experience with it. I know some of my other colleagues have been doing that though. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Heather. Hello, Frank. Let's see. I had a 1 to 256 IFA for Bartonella at Galaxy, 1 to 160 IFA for Bartonella henselae in Canada. Then the Western blot IgG positive for Bartonella and Vinsoni at IGeneX. My Canadian doctor brushes it off and says the titers must be in the thousands range to be an active infection. Is he right? Did you encounter some cases of Bartonella Vinsoni? If yes, what were the symptoms? My symptoms are intermittent: pressure in head, heart pain, bowel pain, painful itching, muscle twitching, tinnitus, and lesions in mouth. Also high iron level, elevated ANA, which means there's some inflammation going on, CD57 low, otherwise often feeling good and energetic. Anything you would suggest? Best wishes for a new journey in Austin. Frank, thank you. I appreciate that, the best wishes part. I would need to ask you a lot of questions, and I'm not going to be able to answer your question, unfortunately. I need a lot more information to help steer through this. I'll just give you one general observation, and that is that testing for Bartonella, I don't care who's doing it, is just not accurate. If there are enough symptoms suggesting Bartonella, then I think it's worthwhile treating for Bartonella. Okay. Now, do your symptoms that you list here scream Bartonella at me? Not necessarily, but I would need to ask you about other Bartonella symptoms. Okay, so the Bartonella symptoms that I like focusing on, one of the hallmarks is difficulty with thinking. Another one could be various forms of neuropathy, which could be numbness, burning, kind of tingling kind of pains. Bartonella is known for giving pervasive and ongoing anxiety. Sometimes people with Bartonella will get a scratch mark rash that looks like literally somebody scratched them on their skin. They can get that as well too. Bartonella sometimes can give abdominal pain. Unexplained abdominal pain can be another part of that as well too. I can't really tell for sure whether you got it or not from what you're telling me here. Again, I would want to ask you a bunch more questions. Okay? All right. Sorry about that, Frank. Good luck to you. Bear with me here, everyone. Let's see here. Hello, Rosanna. Let's see. How do you address mold in your body? Thank you, Marty, for all you do. All right. So it depends on what you mean by mold in your body. I probably what you mean is mold toxin illness. So mold toxin illness, and I have a whole article about this too, but let me just talk about it here briefly. So mold toxin illness was first described by a physician named Richie Shoemaker. And a lot of the ways that he would treat this and diagnose it now have changed as more of us have found different ways of working with his ideas, okay? But what Shoemaker was able to show is that about 25% of people have a genetic abnormality called an HLA-DR defect. And it's a blood test you could do. And what happens when you have this certain kind of HLA-DR genetic defect pattern is your immune system, when it sees mold toxins, does not tag them to be removed. Okay, because what happens in 75% of us that don't have these HLA-DR defects, our immune systems will see those mold toxins, tag them, they get broken down by the immune system and moved out of our body. All right. Now, when they don't get tagged correctly, what happens is those mold toxins go to the liver. The liver then is supposed to be able to transform them from a fat-based toxin into a water-soluble toxin, move them out into the intestines, and as a water-soluble form, they're supposed to get mixed in with our poop, and we're supposed to be able to poop them out. Okay, that's what's supposed to happen. Now, if you're one of the 25%, that doesn't happen because they're not tagged correctly. They go to the liver cannot process them correctly. They get moved into the intestines as a fat-based toxin, and then in the intestines, they get reabsorbed again. And once they get reabsorbed, they just go back into your bloodstream, all right? So it's like you have this swimming pool of toxins that you can't get out of, right? And what happens with mold toxin illness is mold toxins, just like Lyme germs, trigger the immune system to make a group of chemicals called cytokines, all right? Cytokines are good and bad. On the good side, cytokines help your immune system work better, to either get rid of mold toxins or to get rid of Lyme. But in the case of Lyme, it doesn't often do a good job. In the case of mold toxins, 25% of people, it can't do a good job. So eventually the immune system, trying harder and harder, makes too many cytokines, and too many cytokines are what give you most of the symptoms we see in mold toxicity illness and most of the symptoms we see in Lyme disease, which is poor sleep, difficulty thinking, low energy, body pains, neurologic dysfunction, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, most of the symptoms that we have that are mold toxin symptoms, or most of the symptoms that are Lyme symptoms, are due to cytokine excess. Okay, all right. So the way to figure out if you have mold toxin illness is to test for it. All right. Now, Shoemaker would have everyone get this test called an HLA-DR test. Okay, which looks to see, do you have the genetic profile to be somebody that may not be able to remove mold toxins? Notice the word I said, may not be able to, all right? And what I have found in working over time is that some people with the HLA-DR testing that came back normal might still get better when I did things to take care of their mold illness, all right? And also, having the genetic predisposition for a problem doesn't mean you actually have the problem, all right? Okay, so his testing is not always correct. Either it misses it, you have a problem, or even if it says you don't have a problem, you do have a problem, or it may say you have a problem when you really don't. Okay, all right. So there have been some other labs that have been coming up with ways to see, do you really have too many toxins in you? And one of my favorite labs for that is a lab out of Texas called Real-Time Labs. Real-Time Labs collects, you send urine to Real-Time Labs, and they'll look and see, are you putting out too many toxins into your urine? And if you are putting it into your urine, it means there's too many in your bloodstream, basically, okay? They look to see if you have toxins they look for 4 different families. There's something called ochratoxin, aflatoxin, trichosethine, which is black mold, and gliotoxin. Now, gliotoxin can come from various kinds of molds in a wet, moldy environment, but also can come from yeast living in your intestines too. So gliotoxin gets a little confusing, okay? But the first step to figure out if you have the problem is to see, do you have the problem? And that would be to get this urine mold toxin study. I like using Real-Time Labs, okay? I believe Great Plains Labs also has a test that will look at this as well too, okay? All right. Now, if you have the problem, then the treatment is make sure you're not still living in a moldy environment, okay? So you need to get people in to inspect your home and see, do you have it? Get people in to inspect your work environment. Make sure you don't have mold in these environments, okay? All right. Second thing, you got to start pulling those toxins out. Now, remember I said in this problem, those toxins go to the liver, and the liver sends them out in the intestines in their original form, still as a fat-based toxin, okay? So what Shoemaker was able to show is that if you used binders, things that bind up those mold toxins, you can pull them out, all right? And what he worked with was a cholesterol binding medicine called cholestyramine. So cholestyramine is a powder that was designed to bind cholesterol, which is a fat. Okay. Work that has been done over the years shows that there might be other binders that can work better depending on what exact toxin is that's in you. Okay. So if you have black mold toxin, you might do better using a certain group of binders than if you have more ochre toxin in you, for instance. Okay. All right. And so other binders that you could use would be like activated charcoal, might be using bentonite clay. Okay. And so there's an article I have put together that has a description in there as to, depending on what's elevated, what binders might you use. All right. I'll show that to you here in a minute. All right. The other thing, if you're looking for more insight about this, there's a recent book out by a colleague of mine named Neil Nathan called Toxic. I think that's what it's called, is Toxic. And basically, it's Neil is quite the expert on mold toxicity illness. You might be interested in reading that book because he goes even further than some of the recommendations that I have on it too. All right. So let me just show you this article. Okay. So anyhow, part of this is getting the toxins out. All right. And that can take a good month, 3 months, 6 months, or longer sometimes. Okay. And you have to be careful if you want to go slow with it. Eventually, with cholestyramine, if you're using that, you might want to work up to 3 times a day. But you have to start at maybe half a scoop 1 time a day to begin with, for instance, okay? Because if you get too aggressive removing your mold toxins, it can really flare you up, all right? Let me show you an article that's a good starting point for you to look at, and then you might want to look at Dr. Neil Nathan, that's Nathan, and his new book, okay? All right, so let me just do a quick screen share here for you. All right, so this is Treat Lyme, my Lyme disease information site. Take a look at this chapter on detoxification. And this is the article on mold and Lyme toxin illness, okay? All right. You could use that as a starting point. In there, I talk about the different binders and how you might use them, all right? Now, the other part of your question that I should have addressed too is that sometimes not only do people have the toxins in them, but by living in moldy environments, their sinus passages and their intestines could get colonized with mold, in which case, if that happens, you need to use mold killers as well too, all right? Right now, while we're looking at here, I just want to look at Dr. Nathan's new book so that I have it correct here. Hold on a minute. I think it's called Toxic by Neil Nathan. Yeah. So it's called, this book, Toxic, Heal Your Body by Neil Nathan. It's a very comprehensive resource about how to deal with mold toxicity illness, okay? So that might be something for you to take a look at as well too. All right. All right, Rosanna, good luck to you. Thanks you for that question. Hello, Kay. Let's see. Hi, I have paresthesias from head to toe all day, every day. Is there something that can help? So paresthesias, everyone, can mean a number of things. Sometimes it can mean a lot of burning, zapping kind of pains. It can be numbness that kind of comes and goes. It could be itching. So it's nerve injury, okay? And the symptoms related to nerve injury, basically. It can even be hypersensitivity to touch as well, too, okay? So, Kate, I guess there are 2 things. You need to repair your nerves, all right, as part of the process. A second thing, and as part of that, that would be to repair the energy factories in the nerves called the mitochondria, all right? And I talked about how to do that earlier tonight, but basically you want to get on something called NT factor. You want to be on glutathione. You want to be on coenzyme Q10. And you want to be on acetyl L-carnitine if you're a vegetarian, all right? In addition to those, you also want to see what's injuring those nerves. So could it be heavy metal toxicity? So you ought to talk with your providers about getting some testing done to see if it's heavy metals that are injuring those nerves. If they haven't figured it out, you might want to look for mold toxins. Mold toxins can injure the nerves. Lyme can injure nerves. and Bartonella can injure nerves, okay? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in addition to trying to repair those nerves, figure out what the underlying thing is that's injuring those nerves. And it could be mold toxin illness, it could be Lyme, it could be Bartonella, it could be heavy metal toxicity. You want to look and see if if those things could be involved, okay? All right, let me just do a quick screen share again here for you. All right, so back in my online guide. Again, take a look at in the brain and nerves chapter in terms of how do you fix injured nerves. It's the same kind of steps you would take to fix injured mitochondria. All right, take a look at this article called Lyme Disease Nerve Damage. And it basically has a recording of me talking about this in a previous webinar. But in here, I mentioned the NT factor phospholipids, being on glutathione, being on coenzyme Q10, and being on carnitine, okay? The other thing you might want to do is look at being on an anti-inflammatory that would decrease the inflammation. I like using the herb curcumin to help with that. And then look to see if you have heavy metal toxicity as well too. And again, to this, I would add, see if you have mold toxicity could be involved, and then see if it's Lyme or Bartonella that could be involved too, okay? All right. All right. Okay, thanks for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Mary. Hold on here just a minute. Let's see. Thank you in advance for this amazing opportunity to ask questions. You're welcome. Let's see. I have Lyme and Epstein-Barr. I was having great success with penicillin and cat's claw liposomal vitamin C. However, over time, I have become extremely sensitive to almost everything I have tried. The cat's claw and penicillin were really helping, and then I started to get burning in my kidneys and bladder. The penicillin started to give me a rash over my entire body. I think I may have a mast cell disorder, so I've been taking P5P and quercetin. I was perhaps taking too much quercetin as I got too upset. I have not been tested for mast cell, but I have read that this is hard to diagnose. The other problem I have, as if this wasn't enough, is burning in my calves and skin areas. Protein of any animal origin seems to cause cramps in my thighs and wrist areas. I'm not able to eat any animal source protein, etc. No grain, no dairy, no sugar, ugh. I know this is such a challenge, and I so very much appreciate any ideas you might have. Okay, so first of all, one of the things it is possible. Okay, so when people become very sensitive after they've been on antimicrobials for a while, one of the first things I like to do is to make sure is to possibly treat for yeast overgrowth in the intestines. Okay, so what the relationship is by being on herbal or prescription antibiotics, you knock down good bacteria in the intestines, which then allows too many yeast to grow, okay? And when too many yeast grow, the cells that line the intestines, immune cells that line the intestines, so 60 to 70% of your immune system lines the intestines, okay? And those cells see the yeast sitting there and start having allergic reaction to it, which basically starts releasing histamines throughout the body. In addition, those yeast that are growing too much in your intestines trigger a cytokine reaction by your immune cells. And as I mentioned tonight already, most of your Lyme symptoms relate to too many cytokine symptoms. So if you get too many yeast living in the intestines, that triggers too many cytokines. Okay, you see what the problem is, all right? All right, now there's too many yeast and essentially kind of reset the allergy thermostat by triggering your allergy system to turn on too much in the intestines. And that's why I say I would focus at that level first, all right? So I would consider treating for too many yeast, all right? And I'll show you an article that you can look at later about how I would recommend treating too many yeast, but basically nystatin and diflucan that I mentioned earlier tonight when somebody else raised a question about yeast, all right? If that doesn't work, then the next step I would look at is starting to treat for mast cell activation syndrome, all right? And there's no number of steps that you need to take for that. And in fact, at last week's webinar, we had a long discussion about it. And so there's a whole webinar, or there's a whole video I created on that is part of my article on mast cell activation. But the key things about mast cell activation, I just want to point out, and then I'll show you where the article is. So there's a group of cells that historically we thought were only involved in allergies, and that's mast cells, okay? And inside mast cells are where histamines are made, and they get released whenever those mast cells are exposed to things we're allergic to, all right? Now, those cells also, we now know, before we had probably had a limited view of what they actually are more than just histamine producers. In fact, those cells make a lot of cytokines too. And in fact, they get turned on by things we're infected with, all right? So they get turned on by Lyme, Bartonella, and they can really get turned on by yeast. The other thing that turns them on are toxins, all right? So the thing, and stress turns them on too, okay, all right? So in terms of treating mast cell activation, one step is deal with the infections triggering the mast cells, all right? In which case I'm saying here, there may be a good chance that yeast is one of the big culprits because you are on a bunch of things that would lead to yeast growing too much. It may have turned them on. Okay, that's why I'm coming up with that idea. All right. In addition, look at all the other infections that could be stimulating them. Number two, you got to deal with the stress in your life. You might want to meditate, talk to counselors, whatever it takes to de-stress. That's a big factor. Okay. Number three, stabilize your mast cells. Quercetin does that. Other things that do that is luteolin does that. Number four, deal with antihistamines. Things like Benadryl, Zyrtec, cimetidine. Those are things that can be antihistamine. If you have a lot of breathing problems, get on something called a leukotriene inhibitor that deals with the inflammation of this, okay? And then eliminate things you're reacting to. You got to pull them out because those things are stimulating your mast cells too, all right? So you might need to do something called an elimination diet, which is to remove anything anyone has ever had an allergic reaction to, pull it out, and then you could add them back in one at a time after a few weeks and see if they're triggering your problem. Remove yourself from anything in the environment that's stimulating those mast cells. You just got to eliminate the things that are triggering those mast cells. Now, over time, if you do this whole program, and it takes a lot, I know, over time, those mast cells will reset. They will not be as reactive over time. You may not need to even go down that pathway, though. It could be as simple as knocking yeast out of your system. Okay, all right. So I'm going to show you two things here real quick. I'm going to do a screen share. All right. So first of all, in terms of yeast, take a look. I have a whole chapter on yeast. And take a look at this one called A Silent Problem. Do you have yeast? And then take a look at this one, Kills Yeast, a brief guide. Okay, those are my ideas about how do you diagnose and then how do you treat. Okay, all right. And then in terms of mast cell activation syndrome, take a look in my immune system chapter and take a look at this article. And there's the recording from last week's webinar. Okay, all right. But this gives you a whole comprehensive view about what the symptoms are of mast cell activation, as well as how do you diagnose it, and then how do you treat it. Okay, it's all in here. All right, let me go back here. All right. All right, Mary, good luck to you. Mast cell activation syndrome is just nasty. But before saying that, I mean, it's a hard thing to get under control. You can get it under control, okay, but it just may take some time. But before even going down that pathway, I would consider, in my practice, if I were seeing you, I would consider yeast and whether you might have too much of that. It's something you ought to talk to your healthcare provider team about too. Okay? All right. All right, everyone. That's it for me for tonight. Listen, happy holidays, everyone. We're not going to be together next week. I hope you're all going to be with family and friends. And I wish everyone happy holidays. I also wish you well in the new year, too, because we'll be getting together after the new year. keep your eyes out tomorrow morning. I'll have an email around, again, 8:30 in the morning with details on how to sign up for the next series of webinars. Again, we're going to be moving those to Thursday, okay? And then also I will have information about how you see the recording of today's webinar, okay? Enjoyed being here with you all tonight. It's been a good year to be with all of you. It's had a lot of changes in my life, as many of you know, moving here to Austin, Texas. But I'm very hopeful for the new year. And I wish all of you health and wellness in the new year as well, too. Good night, everyone.